Hey everybody, Ben here doing a quick little video on my Deadlock Model C made by Grant and Gavin Hawk. This is basically a break it open, clean it, things you want to, pay attention to when you open her up. As you're carrying your Deadlock as an EDC, you want to clean it out once in a while just to keep it working properly. With a knife like this that's got a lot of tight tolerances inside that give it that rock solid lockup when you have it open, makes your friends go, holy cow, that's what? That's an automatic knife? The blade moves and it's a fixed blade basically when it's open? You're kidding me. Let me play with that. And you're like, no, you can't play with my $1,000 Deadlock. Give me that back. Just kidding. Hopefully you let your friends play with your Deadlock so they can get one too. Anyway, so I'm not going to do a lot of lip flapping here. Hopefully my cats won't start wrestling with each other and growling in the background there like I think they're about to. So let's do the first thing we need to do to open up our Model C. We're going to disengage the lock or blade here. Just hold the blade, pull the switch back. Pretty simple if you've ever played with a double action out the front of any kind. And then as far as taking it apart, you're only focusing on these 5 screws, at least initially. It doesn't matter which order you remove them in. These screws are on this side of the handle all the same length. I'm just going to start with the one back here under the pocket clip. And this screw will actually be the last screw you put back into place. And I'll show you why later on. It's just a tolerance thing, or tolerances thing. Got a little trick to get it back into place easily so you don't sit and struggle with it for 10-15 minutes like I did the first time I ever took this knife apart and put it back together. It's a good thing. Good tolerances problem. Just going to remove each of these, kind of keep my finger on the screws I'm pulling them out, and I've got a little handy dandy cup here. Just going to put my screws in. I highly suggest doing something like this too. Of course, I've got some extra screws anyway because I, just planned ahead when I bought my Deadlock. Said, hey, I'm going to keep this thing for quite a while, maybe the rest of my life, might pass it on. You never know. I consider a Deadlock to be a potentially heirloom quality piece. Even if you do use it, you don't abuse it, you can keep it going, running for who knows how long. There go my damn cats. Don't knock over my camera, knock it off. That noise is just the blade wiggling around in there a little bit, if you heard that. This Sennheiser microphone picks up a lot. Love it. So, there we go. Those screws are out. And the one under the pocket clip's going to stay where it is. So don't worry about dropping it or it going anywhere. On the Model C handle scale, once you got those screws out, it's going to lift out and off pretty easily. Shouldn't be any resistance there. Beautiful machine work as usual. You wouldn't expect anything less from G&G Hawk with their products. It's been my experience anyway over the last few years, owning my Model A, then my Model B, and now my Model C. Really clean machining inside and out. No obvious shortcuts taken. I mean, attention to detail on these knives is absolutely phenomenal, honestly. Bolted in, 2 screws here from the inside of the handle scale, grip clip. Of course, it's not functioning as it normally would because my screw's in there under it in the way. I'm going to set this over here out of our way. And then we've got 5 screws also holding our strike plate down, this big piece of steel here. This steel piece, the strike plate, its main significance, from what I understand, I'm probably going to say something that Gavin's going to be like, no, that's not why it's there. But, I'm just imagining things here. Its main function is to engage with the blade pin here, this black circular piece, on lockup, and when it's open, like it is there, it of course not only stops the blade from shooting out the handle, but there's a beveled edge here, a beveled edge under the strike plate in this area, which I'll show you when I get this puppy off in a moment. And then of course you have that forward to back at least lockup accomplished through there. So I'm going to disengage the blade again. There we go. And we're going to take off the strike plate. Now these screws, 4 of them are the same length, and then 1 toward the front of the handle, which I've always got to remind myself, let's see, is a little longer than the others. It's the one here, I believe. There's a spring hook, which I'll point out here in a moment. That's what the part is called. It basically engages the lock function of the lock mechanism in the blade when the knife is open. So again, I'm just going to take these out. I'm going to set them over here until I remember which screw's the shortest, because you'll want to put it back in the spot it came out of, obviously. Got one here. And if you notice, I'm kind of a nerd and I like to see, observe things like this. These screws have more of a pan head to them, so a slightly rounded shape on the head of the screw. And then these screws are a flat or flush head to them. You can see that there. Just a little cool detail. And of course they fit down flush into the strike plate. If you've not seen my other videos with my Model C, I encourage you to go back and look at them. These numbers here, they're not handwritten by me. The 5 and the 8, I believe, don't quote me on it, but I believe those are quality control inspector numbers or maybe assembler numbers. Just another little awesome thing that shows you that, there's attention to detail when these knives are put together. Those 4 are all the same, so this is our lucky number 5 screw here that's a little bit longer than the rest. And that's because of just design differences in the knife here. Tolerances, whatever, it just needs to grip down a little bit more deeply. And there it is, if you can make that out. Thankfully it fell onto the paper towel. A little bit longer than these other screws here. I'm just going to go ahead and set it there. Doesn't matter if I mix them up, they're all going back where they were. Strike plate comes off. I'm going to set this guy down for a moment. And again, like I was talking about earlier, we've got a nice clean beveled edge that goes all the way around. Not totally sure. I guess it's because of the blade lock pin or stop pin there that does engage at least somewhat with the blade pin as the blade goes in and out of the knife or handle frame there. A little bit of a shiny spot there just from me opening and closing the knife almost daily, sometimes several times a day as I use it. Little shiny spot down here too, if you can make that out. A little bit of rub. Totally normal, nothing to worry about. Nice hefty piece of steel there too, that strike plate. Really love that. Sounds like a good piece of steel when you set it down too. And then the blade here, try not to cut myself, be mindful of where the sharp places are. We've got the lock mechanism. It should operate just like mine does, up, down, nice and freely. And most of the time you don't need to take the parts out of here to clean your knife, your Deadlock. They're held in, at least on the Model C now. I don't recall about the Model B or A. There may have been a C-clip on some of the knives at some point along the way. But I like that they've got that back little moon clip, C-clip, whatever you call it there, to retain the blade pin, which of course then holds all these parts in. So if you're just doing a basic breakdown, cleaning every few months or whatever, like I do with mine, this is basically all you need to take out as far as the blade and the lock mechanism go. Kind of like you would if you're just doing a field strip on a handgun, for example. Take the slide off, the barrel, the spring assembly, clean each part respectively. You don't have to really get the nitty-gritty, every little piece out kind of deal. Usually you can take like a soft, like a gun cleaning brush. I would recommend a nylon brush. Maybe use some gun scrubber that's safe for plastic parts, although this is all metal as far as I know. There's nothing plastic here. You can use a pretty generous blast of the cleaner, kind of let it dry, scrub around in there, blast it again, and set it aside, maybe wipe off the parts. If you want to do a more detailed cleaning, of course, if you really saw some crud in there, or the function just wasn't right, you were having lockup issues, or you take it out and it's like, feels grimy for some reason, you got buildup in the lock mechanism, by all means, pop that C-clip off, do it over something like this to catch it in, because you only get one with your knife. Not a big deal if you lose it. In fact, I know from my own experience and even talking to Gavin over the last few years, C-clip is not vital to the function of the knife. So if you did lose it, as long as you have all these parts, definitely don't lose any of them, but it's okay if you lose that. Regardless, that's basically the gist of what you would need to clean. Oh. On my Model C, I'm just going to point out, brag a little bit, I'm one of the very few lucky owners of a single-edged blade at the moment on my Model C. And that's because when I heard that the Model Cs were coming out, I said, hey guys, send a friendly email. Is there any way with the design changes, the Model B to the Model C, I could potentially get my Model B blade into a Model C frame? And they said, why yes, Ben, we can do that for you. Isn't that awesome? So basically, I traded up from my Model B to my Model C. And I really do truly feel like I traded up. This is, in my humble opinion, after owning all three of the Deadlock models, the best that they've come out with. Just the best refinements, design upgrades, changes over the years, fit, finish, all that kind of stuff. It's gotten better and better and better, model to model. So far as cleaning the frame goes, on this side, in my opinion, really, I just kind of eyeball things. If I see any obvious crud or buildup anywhere, I'm going to take a Q-tip, cotton swab, something like that, get it out. A little bit there, get it out. And I just kind of eyeball things. If I see some buildup, like in this area especially, this is where your ball detent and your lock mechanism engages. This guy here, in other words, I need to sharpen my knife, so I feel safe handling it by the edge. Yeah, it engages with that steel block in the frame there on lockup, and then yeah, that's the lock position. And then unlock, boop, that pops in, unlocks the knife. So, just basic eyeballing, common sense, if you will, kind of stuff. That's clean. I don't see any real crud anywhere else. If you did, and you felt like you needed to take this apart further, you can. If you watch my last video, I'm not going to do it all because there's a lot. Not a lot, but it's just time-consuming stuff. A lot of tight tolerances to further take this part of the knife apart. In fact, let's see. To do that, you have to remove this screw here, which is the longest screw in the knife. It basically runs from here, the outside of the frame, almost all the way through this block here. So it's a good nearly half-inch long screw. Longest screw in the knife, once again. It holds in this block, the locking block, if you will, in a very tightly fit cutout here. Trust me when I say that. And again, you can see my last video where I kind of struggled getting that part out even after the screw was out. So you remove that screw, wiggle this guy out carefully, And then you have a plate here. This is a steel plate that runs all the way inside of the frame. You remove this screw at the back, and then carefully wiggle that plate out. You can make it out there at the front of the handle. There's that thin steel lip there. And then once you have that guy out of the way, you get a little more room, like in this area especially. You could do some cleaning, blah, blah, blah. But otherwise, I mean, really, compressed air, maybe some gun scrubber, compressed air again, will clean out most of this stuff that you might accumulate inside your Deadlock. My humble opinion, you don't really need to, especially on a double action out the front, and especially one with the tolerances that this one has. You don't need to go putting grease inside the frame and inside the lock mechanism. Especially in this area here where this spring hook is. You can just make out that little brass spring hook there. Moves when I push on it. That engages with your lock mechanism, and along with the inertia of the blade moving forward when it opens, and causes your lockup to happen. So you don't want to weigh it down, so to speak, with something like grease, which can slow down the motion of the part there. You basically want a free moving blade with as little drag on it as possible, which, by the way, with the 7075, I believe, aluminum frame, and combined with this hard coat anodize that's done on the inside and out, which is awesome. It actually provides a type of lubricity mechanically where you don't really need to oil inside the frame. All you're going to do is attract crud and be more likely to actually increase friction by pocket lint and build up in these areas. And I'm not really worried about scratching anything. I mean, again, the finish on this frame is probably, if I remember it right, it's around 68-ish Rockwell, so it's actually probably as close to or harder than this tool here. Not too worried about it. And then really, once it's clean, dry, I might put a little bit of light gun oil on, I don't know, maybe a drop, kind of like in a Glock pistol. Minimum is best. A drop here under where the slider plate moves back and forth, and then a drop over here. You don't even have to take the spring assembly out unless it's just got a bunch of crud on it, under it, whatever. And then in the blade, the lock mechanism, again, I never oil mine. I don't put any grease in it. The parts are moving freely like they should be. That's how they should be moving. Yeah, you're going to get a wiggle. You're going to get a rattle when your knife is open. You can probably hear that. It's not a big deal. I'd rather I hear that rattle and everything locks up 100% versus the other way around. So, that was basically just a quick little, hey, take it apart, put it back together, how to clean it, my humble opinions on stuff. I'm just going to bolt everything back in now. Long screw, I'm going to go ahead and put it back in first, so I have the peace of mind that I got it back in its place. I'm not going to go back and fumble, have to remove a screw that I didn't mean to put somewhere. You can't really put them in the wrong place anyway. If you were to put one of the shorter screws in the long screw place, it's not going to thread in. And, you know, the other way around, if you try to put the long screw down here or anywhere the short screws go, it's not going to go in all the way. So, of course, the screw holes next to the screws where I'm placing these back in are for the screws that hold the other side of the frame back in. And honestly, I'm just doing kind of finger snug here. I'm not going and really cranking those in. Even though 7075 is basically, I don't know, I hate to say tempered. It's basically kind of like a, I don't know, it's stronger than 6061 that other makers like, say, Microtech usually use in their knives. So I'm not too worried about hurting the screw threads but I'm still only going finger tight. I also don't believe these screws need to have Loctite on them. As far as I know, G&G Hawk don't put Loctite on them anyway. And there we go. I'm just going to check them one more time just for giggles. They're not turning. Okay, I'm comfortable there. I'm going to put this side of the frame back on. And again, we'll mess with this screw. Just going to flip it around, get it lined back up with its hole. Can be a little tricky, a little patience. Don't do this if you're having a stressful day. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in my other screws first because it's going to work out better that way, just trust me. And these screws turn down into, of course, the strike plate, which is a nice piece of steel there. Steel on steel screw threads. I'm going to set this down and do this like I should be, using the tool and then my finger to hold these. Less likely to fumble things that way. You don't have to worry about properly lining up the handle scale just right because it's machined over the strike plate, basically. So it's just going to drop down and be perfectly aligned like it should be. That screw is acting a little weird. There we go. And let me do something here. I'm just going to change to this screw. Okay. It didn't like that hole for some reason. Okay, there we go. Maybe starting to get a little bit of a burr. I may go look at that screw later on. Maybe a rough spot on the threading that I may just scrap that screw if that's the case, or if I can't polish the burr off. I'm just turning these until they're snug. I've never had a deadlock, by the way, in my experience. Have screws work loose just by using the knife, so again, I've never felt the need for thread lock or even blue, the stuff that releases more easily. Now for getting the spring, or the screw back in place under the grip clip here, there's a little trick I learned on my own after 10, maybe 15 minutes of frustration. Just take something like one of your Q-tips or cotton swabs you've already got anyway, and just wedge it under the front of the clip here. What that does is it straightens things up. It gives you a nice straight alignment here with the grip clip hole, the screw itself, and then of course the threaded hole that the screw's got to go back into in the strike plate. Let me make sure I'm in the screw head here, going off camera a second. Okay, there we go. And then it's just gonna turn right back in. Sorry, new camera, I'm still getting used to, watching, making sure I'm in the right place. There we go, snug there. Can pull that out, everything's good. Just gonna let my blade fly forward there. Oh goodness, it works, thankfully. Nice rock solid lockup, just like it did before I opened it. Whew. So glad. I mean, these deadlocks, you gotta be so careful. Insert sarcasm. I mean, I love this freaking knife. Don't have to worry about voiding the warranty if I have to, take care of it myself. Don't have to send it back to the maker via a licensed seller. I mean, I always thought that was so silly with tech. And and then wait who knows how long and hopefully get the same knife back, right? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sound like an ass, but just past experiences, they may be completely different these days. But anyway, most things with the Deadlock, you can take care of yourself. I've even had a situation in the past where I had to have a part replaced. I forget what, something about, I think it was a screw, whatever it was. I'm having a brain fog. Anyway, I was able to fix it myself, in other words. Everybody, thanks for watching. Hopefully you got something good out of that. And we'll see you on the next one.